Friday. I hope you all had a beautiful short week, but we've got a great guest to wrap off the week with you guys. Sherí Barros is a seasoned marketing and brand executive who currently serves as the Chief Marketing Communications Officer at ZERO Prostate Cancer. She joined the executive team in October of 24, bringing an extensive background in purpose-driven marketing and sports brand partnerships. Sherí has spent over 20 years across the nonprofit and for-profit sectors with a particular specialty engaging male audiences through highly visible sports and community brands. As CMCO, she leads the organization's national marketing, communications, and brand amplification strategies. Her focus is on the mission-first strategy to reduce late-stage diagnosis and address health disparities in the prostate cancer community. Before joining ZERO, she was the VP of Sports Partnerships, and she led a national team managing high-profile collaborations with major sports leagues, NFL, NBA, et cetera, and Fortune 5000 sponsorships to drive the ACS mission. Sherí has held significant internal roles in professional sports marketing, including head of marketing for the NBA's San Antonio Spurs and marketing roles across the NFL's Oakland Raiders and Atlanta Falcons. In 2019, she was an inaugural jury member for the Cannes Lion Entertainment for Sports Awards, one of the most prestigious honors in global marketing. She's a winner of the Advertising Telly Award for Excellence in Video and Television across all screens, and she has served as an adjunct professor of marketing at NYU and guest lectured at UCLA on the management of media, entertainment, and sports properties. Sherí, thanks so much for coming on, spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so awesome background, and I love kind of the dovetail of traditional sports and the nonprofit space. But maybe you can contextualize things for a little bit for us a little bit. So, where'd you grow up? What'd you study? And how'd you get into this exciting world of sports marketing? And then kind of dovetail into the the cause-based side of things.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because where I grew up is directly tied to what ended up being a sports career. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, originally. In background, yes, and I grew up a huge fan of the worst to first Atlanta Braves in the 90s. So that really inspired, my interest in sports. From a fan perspective, in middle school, I guess at that stage. And then I went on to college at Florida State University, majored in psychology, but it's actually an internship that I received from a career fair at Florida State with the PGA Championship, then the 11th largest sporting event in the world. And and that was a result of my part-time job at Turner Field in Atlanta, being the only career experience on my resume at the time. So piqued PGA's interest, and they had a really great program at the time, diversity internship program to bring more people of color and women into the golf management space. And so that was before I entered my senior year at Florida State. So really inspired my marketing career, but I got a degree in psychology. Obviously, that's been helpful on the marketing.
It wasn't marketing's all about how people think and persuasion. 100%,
right? Exactly. So that really inspired my interest at Florida State and that internship with the PGA Championship, and the rest, as they say, is history.
I love it. So, and then PGA moved on to the Falcons or the Raiders first?
That's right. So several internships, actually, which is, when I am talking to, students or those that are interested in getting into sports, always talk about how valuable those internships are before you move into your full-time career. And so I extended, my college years for a couple of years, went to grad school in Dallas, Texas. I'm actually on the advisory board now for the University of North Texas Sport Management MBA program. Cool. So go Mean Green. And they're partnered with the Cowboys and some great sports organizations in Dallas now on that program. But I was in grad school. So I actually, after the PGA, interned in grad school with the Texas Rangers. I was in community and player relations. To date myself, it was the year that A-Rod moved from the Rangers to the Yankees. So way back. Yeah. And then my third internship was a sports marketing agency that at that time was managing NBA Hoop It Up. They've since been acquired by WME IMG, so they're part of that whole agency conglomerate. So after those three internships, I then finished my master's and moved back to Atlanta and started working with the Atlanta Falcons for my first full-time role.
That's awesome. And then when did the Raiders come knocking?
So the Raiders came along after the Falcons, and that was an amazing experience. I was there in '09 to 2010, which was one of the last years of the legendary Al Davis, being there. So we had the privilege of meeting him and, being able to be a part of a culture, that he built in the Raiders organizations. It's interesting because I went from the Atlanta Falcons, it was a very modern, NFL team, younger, from there to the Raiders, which was, that legendary NFL, old school football experience. So I'm really, really blessed to have had both of those perspectives of NFL teams and brands. And I still use, tenets like commitment to excellence and just win, baby, like to this day. So when I was there, actually, one of my coworkers said, once a Raider, always a Raider. So even, when you move on, it's very true. It's very true. And then I left and went to the other silver and black, which is the San Antonio Spurs. And that was my last team. And that was an opportunity to run all the marketing and advertising for a team. So really great experience down there in San Antonio. And I don't know when this is going to air, but we are just before the Spurs go into Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So I got to get in and go Spurs go for my team.
Let's go. Yeah, it's exciting. Exciting time right now for sports and leading into, we talked a little bit off camera, World Cup, LA 28. Yes. Sports has never been bigger. It's never been more international in focus and scope, really becoming a global phenomenon. American sports exporting internationally and international sports coming to America, like F1 and cricket and things like that. So at what point did you kind of get the itch to think about moving into the world of nonprofit marketing? Obviously with ZERO Prostate Cancer, the tie-in to that being something that is somewhat focused on men, sports being a great opportunity to kind of get in front of an elusive, hard audience and kind of, work with players and talk about advocacy. But when did that start becoming, something that, you started to integrate into strategies? But more importantly, when did you think that you might at one point maybe make the jump over to flex your sports marketing chops for the world of nonprofit marketing?
Yeah, such a great question. And it's definitely been an evolution. And I say this a lot also when I'm speaking about, my career, which has been a career of, pivots and transitions, but very much an intersection that makes sense. So what I tell people a lot is there was definitely the choice to move away from the team side of sports into a sports agency where I worked for 3 years on the corporate sports marketing side. And then knowing that, I had such a passion when I was working with sports teams who all have nonprofit foundations. So the Atlanta Falcons, the Oakland Raiders, the, San Antonio Spurs, all of the work I did there was certainly on the for-profit side and, from a broadcast and butts and seats from ticket sales and all of that marketing. But it was also marketing our nonprofit work in the community, which for a sports franchise is part of the very fabric of why we exist, to serve the community, represent the community, and really be that identity and that connection for people who live in their cities. And so that connection was very natural for me because I had always sat in both lanes when I was working for sports franchises. And it was really an opportunity that found me to go to the American Cancer Society, because when I was leaving side, a former colleague of mine at the agency reached out to me and said, hey, we really need someone with a sports expertise, which nonprofits traditionally hadn't thought about, the need to really have someone who comes from that background managing the level of deals that they had. Like at that time, the American Cancer Society was almost 10 years into their NFL partnership and, had partnerships with the National Hockey League and the NBA and women's tennis and all the major leagues. And so that colleague reached out and offered me the opportunity just based on my background. And I said, I've always done it sort of part-time, as I said, but whenever I would talk about my work with sports franchises and some of those most impactful moments, it was always the community and the nonprofit work that we did. So I said, how great to take all of my for-profit chops and bring it to the nonprofit side in that way. And it was the best of both worlds. It was such a great intersection, and being able to, do all of this for the purpose and the cause of saving lives has been fantastic. And as you rightfully pointed out, unintentionally became an expert at marketing to men. Obviously, leagues very heavily market to women as well. So it's
especially now more than ever, right?
Exactly. So just because it's men's sports, it's not all focused on men, but that's a big part of it. And also the relationships that I had from the sports space were, just unintentionally, like I said, setting me up for the role that I'm in now. So then when this opportunity came along, I really wanted to lead a marketing department and a communications department full time, whereas I was really on the partnership side once I left the sports team side. So this was a chance to get back to running a department, running 2 departments on marketing and communications, and bringing, like I said, that pulse, the relationships, the knowledge of marketing to men to the health side. And it's just been a phenomenal 2 years, about 2 years in now in this role. And as you may have seen, I mean, we had a blockbuster year last year. We launched the largest initiative in U.S. history for prostate cancer. And I established an ambassador program. So we partnered with Beyonce's father, Matthew Knowles.
Yeah, Matthew's been on the show before. He's amazing.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, he's great. We're so happy to partner with him. Alan Houston, who was a colleague and a mutual friend of mine before I joined. And that was also just, a very, very, I call it like divine intervention type of experience, because I met Alan and he shared that he was a prostate cancer survivor before I even knew I'd be in this role. So he was one of the first people I called and reached out to, and he's been a global ambassador. And, also shout out to the New York Knicks for being in the NBA finals. So we're very proud of Alan and the Knicks. He's a legend, and he's also still there as a VP of player development. So yeah, being able to bring those sports relationships. We partnered with NBA coaches last year. We were able to also pull in, a lot of influencers on the entertainment side. Dwight Eubanks, Bravo TV star, announced his diagnosis. We released that exclusively to People magazine last year, and that took off like wildfire. We did a NASCAR car last year. We branded a NASCAR vehicle with our partner AstraZeneca Memorial Weekend. So actually a year ago. This past weekend. So we've been able to do a lot. And what I always say that, I'm focused on with this cause and this mission is we really need to bring the energy that men have. When men think of health, they think of fitness, right? They think of how much they can fit, how much, they, are doing in the gym. We want them to bring that same level of energy to their medical health. And so we're fusing that gap, and we were, really, really proud and pleased to be able to partner with Novartis on their Super Bowl ad that they had in the Super Bowl recently. Relax, it's a blood test, which did very well. And again, sending that message to a lot of men who are not aware, about things like your PSA levels, and making sure that when you're going in for your checkups, you're getting that checked. And I always say, again, as what I call myself, a geriatric millennial here, the millennials we're hitting 40 now, so it's time for a lot of even my peers to be thinking about, asking about PSA and knowing your family history, all that. So it really has been a great marriage. I sit at the intersection is how I like to say it, of health and sports. And with this cause, that's been so critical.
I love that. It's interesting. A lot of times I think, especially for challenger brands or even large brands that want to figure out a more sticky way to kind of bring their sports marketing partnerships to life. A lot of times if you approach, a CAA agent to do a deal with a player, it comes with a really hefty price tag. But when you can tie into their philanthropic goals, and, something that they have a passion around, or a foundation or a family member that's been affected by a health outcome that, you guys talk about, on the prostate cancer side, how can marketers take, the passion point of like, there's really nothing more important in people's lives than their health. At the end of the day, if you don't have health, it doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. Everything else kind of goes out the window when you're faced with your own mortality. So how can brands maybe use that sensibility in thinking about ways to partner with athletes that, bring them into a more, authentic, I know is a buzzword, but I think in a lot of times it serves the right purpose. Through partnering through the nonprofit angle, seems like you can get things that are maybe a little less transactional and more based on like passion. Be curious if you could speak to that.
Absolutely. And you 100% spoke to our competitive edge and our strategy there, is tapping into passion and purpose, and really being the voice for a lot of our athlete partners and, our sports brand partners, we are bringing, that really goodwill message and PR opportunity to align them with a cause that, they do genuinely care about. Most of our partners are either impacted by this disease or they have family that are impacted by this disease. And so when we're able to bring them in on the charitable side to donate their time to do some of this work and then align with a partner, one of our corporate partners or sponsors, it's certainly giving them that advantage of being able to have, those platforms, those influencer voices, for a lot less, little to none, because of their connection to us and the cause. So we're certainly leveraging that space, that intersection. And I would also say, it's really important for the brand to understand their message. Certainly one of the things I've done since I've come in is really hone in on our messaging of being that, that charity, that organization that wants to meet men where they are. And what better way to meet them where they are than in the spaces that are not the doctor's offices all the time, that are in the community, that are parts of the things that they love, whether it's lifestyle sports. We do an amazing event during to kick off New York Fashion Week with designer Frederick Anderson. He founded the Blue Jacket Fashion Show. And so it's a men's fashion show that kicks off New York Fashion Week every year. And those are opportunities for us to reach, an audience of men that are in fashion and bringing in influencers from, television and entertainment that we wouldn't normally reach either. So I would say, yes, it's important for brands to leverage the opportunity to partner with organizations like ours, certainly from a PR and community standpoint. But also recognize the value that they have in presenting these opportunities to reach men and reach any audience for that matter in a space where they're more comfortable, where you're meeting them more where they are, which is really important for partners of ours that are like in the pharmaceutical space, for example.
Yeah. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously, you guys might be a smaller or a nonprofit, but some of your partners, you named AstraZeneca, Novartis, these are some of the biggest companies in the world, and being able to share a voice in a moment like the Super Bowl. How does a partnership like that come to life, and how are you able to leverage the media buying capacity and the budgets of some of these larger companies that provide ultimately, the medical intervention side of, the thing that you're talking about, and ultimately when people do face prostate cancer, it's the pharmaceutical companies that they have to interact with in order to get the outcome that they're looking for. So how does a partnership like that come together?
Yeah, it's huge for us. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and one of the things that I'll say, again, just a little bit of a lead into this point is, yes, I spent my career with highly visible brands, but sports teams don't have big marketing budgets either. And so we're very much punching above our weight in those cases. So I am familiar with punching above your weight when you're with, a smaller brand. And yes, certainly the power of partnership, the power of relationships, and particularly in the 7 years that I spent, working with the NFL on behalf of the American Cancer Society. I mean, it's important for the charity to bring, value, like you said, to the public.
Yeah.
And so where we're bringing value is certainly in those, voices, not only the voices of influencers, but really we are the direct line of voice to the patients. And those are obviously future customers, that a lot of our partners want to reach. I think it's also important that we are leveraged as a tool to really build trust. It's difficult, right? It's more difficult if you're a pharmaceutical brand to establish that level of trust. So having a partner like ours, we're the largest men's health advocacy organization in the country. We speak very much on behalf of, those men that are impacted. And so if we're able to bring, a partner into that community and establish some trust in what they represent and wanting to not just focus on the product, obviously, because that's particularly a space where we're not able to endorse any product, but we do want to be able to bring them in and align them on the mission of saving more lives. And so we start there. And then once we've established that that is truly their brand tenet and their focus of saving lives, and hopefully you don't get to the point, right, where you have to use their product. That's certainly a line, that we walk as well, which is the line where we talk about prevention, the line where we talk about early detection and reducing, risk for other cancers. Obviously, ours isn't one of those cancers where you can reduce your risk, but you can certainly know your family history. And the beauty of ours cancer is prostate cancer has a 99% survival if it's caught early. So it might not seem sensible for our pharma brands to come alongside us with that message, but that's absolutely where they want to be. They absolutely want to be with us saying that we want you to know your family history. How can we help you be more informed so you can catch this thing as early as possible. So those are the ways that we are helping them build and establish trust with the audience and making that more tangible in terms of the assets we're delivering. So, what is the impressions and the reach that we're delivering? What is the value of them reaching our database directly? How many people are taking action, based off of what we're promoting, whether it's getting a screening or, searching for more information. So those are some of those tangible I'd say obviously KPIs that we're delivering back to the partner. And in a big way, it's all about helping them to establish more trust and build their reach with their brand through us.
Love it. You also mentioned the idea of aligning with coaches. You talked about family members like Matthew Knowles, obviously being with, 1 degree of separation from Beyonce and Jay-Z. Yeah. How does that kind of work as a, like you said, a scrappy brand that maybe has less budgets, but kind of aligning with, also there's the idea that a lot of times when people are, at the peak of their fame and celebrity and influence, they're younger. So if you can align with coaches, which tend to be older than the players, or adult parents of celebrities, which tend to be older than the celebrities themselves, and maybe more, in a season of life where they have to deal with these types of issues. Can you talk about kind of that as like a proxy to, the end consumer, or kind of aligning yourselves in these spheres of influence?
Yeah, and we saw this actually in real time with our Harris poll, numbers, because we were keeping an eye on things like consideration among specific target audiences, and particularly to that point around Beyonce's father and, and Allen Houston and some of those, African-American figures. We started to see our consideration tick up specifically to the African-American male audience. So yes, that by association connection. And for us, a brand that's, really just starting to put a lot of emphasis in increasing our overall awareness, the awareness that comes by association with an audience that is familiar with, obviously, Beyonce, and her father, which we know is a huge audience that we can reach. For us, the win is even just people now knowing and having heard our brand name through them. We did an episode, which again, this is just an example of the incredible value of ambassadors and partnerships. We did a full 25-minute episode on BET Talks with Matthew Knowles. Be able to have that type of exposure to, of the Paramount BET audience as a result of, our ambassador and our relationship there. And also to hear it come from an ambassador. We see this a lot, obviously, with content creators today. It can't sound like an ad. It really sound like a conversation. It really needs to be someone talking about their experience, their real world experience. And those are the types of things that allow, those with platforms to help us reach people. And they're hearing our brand, but they're hearing it in a way where it's stickier and where it resonates more because it's coming from someone's real lived experience. And then you're connecting that, right, with your identity and your experience.
It's an earned media opportunity versus, it's content that people are tuning in to see versus things that are interrupting them while they're trying to get to content that they want to see.
Exactly.
So we mentioned in the bio that you were part of the 2019 Cannes Lion inaugural jury for entertainment and sports. We're moving into Cannes Lion seasons. We're about, 30 days out. I know you sadly aren't going to be able to join us this year, but could you tell us a little bit about that experience and how important are the Lions and some of these moments where we kind of recognize the best and the brightest of the industry?
Yeah. No, the Cannes Lions experience, will continue to be, the pinnacle experiences of my career. I've been a few times. And as you mentioned, was honored to be a judge on the inaugural. That was actually the first year because they had the entertainment category. for advertising in the entertainment space, and they branched off and did one specifically for sport. And I was privileged and proud to be the inaugural jury, part of the inaugural jury. And one of the things I'll say about that experience, that connects very much to my purpose-driven marketing work is, as a judge and a juror, you're reviewing hundreds of submissions, for these awards. And we actually start a couple of months before Cannes in June. And so as we're going through all the awards, and then we get into the jury room in June, and it's down to like that top, several categories. One of the things that struck me from that first year of the sports awards is a lot of those awards that were in the final categories were purpose impact driven marketing campaigns. Those were the things that were sticky. Those what stood out. Those were what frankly moved the needle on the ROI more, because it had that meaning behind it. And so I felt such a sense of pride, being a purpose driven marketer in that jury room, because those were the impact. Those were the campaigns that drove the most impact. And that year, actually, Steve Stout was the jury president with my group that year. And so when we revealed the first Grand Prix winner of the entertainment for sport category, we spoke to the press about it. And obviously Steve was our spokesperson. But one of the things that I will be proud of is that we selected Nike's Colin Kaepernick Dream Crazy ad for the first Grand Prix.
Amazing.
Yeah. So those are the types of moments that I would say Cannes inspires. It certainly inspires being bold, being courageous in your creative. And then to your point, the global nature of it. I mean, the number of campaigns that came out of Brazil that were, in the top finals, that came out of, Spain, and seeing, Europe and Asia certainly, has amazing marketing. So that combination of being able to see how it's happening globally is just, that's one of the things that will make Cannes, unique from any other marketing creative festival. So fantastic experience. It's great to be around thought leaders in that space for that week. So I'm and sports has stepped up and started to get a lot more involved. I've sort of seen that wave from 2017, my first year at Cannes, to now, almost 10 years. And how much, my colleagues at NFL Players Association are now doing things at Cannes. And so you're seeing a lot more sports. There's now Sport Beach at Cannes.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Sport Beach. It's kind of one of the hot tickets now for Cannes to get into. Yes. And it kind of came out of nowhere, and a lot of deals get done through those relationships that get brokered between leagues and disciplines and players, et cetera.
It's special. And then of course they have the health and the pharma track. So we've been talking to some of our partners about maybe next year doing some things there together as a partnership. So yes, I will be engaged with World Cup this year. So we'll not make it out,
important work.
Sending all the love to my colleagues in Cannes. Yeah.
I love it. We've talked a little bit about your professorship at NYU, doing adjunct work with them, guest lecturing at UCLA. You mentioned the work that you did in Texas as well. Seems like academics and speaking to the next generation from an instructor point of view has been an important component of being a well-rounded executive. What does it do for you, other than, compensation and prestige and things like that, but being able to, be with students or people who are learning the business of marketing, either as undergraduate or graduates? And how important is that as a marketer to kind of, touch and feel the next generation, so to speak, and kind of where their head's at and the things that they're thinking about, the tools that they're using?
Well, and let me just say, I'm so glad you framed it that way, because as inspiring as I just said, Cannes was, when just sort of the other side of your career, once you're established and you've been there and you're learning from, your peers and your colleagues, that experience of teaching undergrads has been equally inspiring, and for exactly the reasons that you just said, because when you can feel and sense the energy from this next generation, any generation that's really coming into their own, how passionate they are about what they want to do with their careers, how much of a sponge they are to soaking up a lot of the information, but also rightfully questioning some things, about, the industry and some of the trends, and being ahead of the curve, of some of the trends, certainly given that they're going to be a lot more tech savvy and AI and, everything forward. So it is equally inspiring to be, in that, position, to be able to teach and to hear from them, just how enthusiastic they are about taking our industry to the next level. So absolutely, I would say that experience, that's the most valuable aspect of that. And I still keep in touch with some of my students from NYU and from UCLA. One of my first, which again, I'm waiting to see when this is going to be the outdated advice, but one of the first things I say to students when I'm opening up a lecture, and I did 2 weeks for UCLA, is everyone needs to add me on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you should, and start using it. And so to see the students, get engaged and reach out to me, as they're starting to, go through their first jobs and things of that nature. It's incredibly inspiring. And us as professionals, right? I say this as well when I usually wrap up my courses is, we are counting on you, the next generation. Like, we want to see you come in and take our work and take what we've done a step further for the good of the industry, for the good of humanity, for a lot of reasons. So it's something I will always do whenever I can find the time, just because it's inspiring, and it's also your way of really connecting to the future through.
Yeah, I love it. I always, anytime any colleague of mine is putting on a seminar or doing a cohort or even like a MBA case study or something like that, I try and raise my hand and participate as much as possible, for those same reasons. I think it's great to give back, but it's a great way to source, talent and stay in touch with people who are starting their careers. Absolutely. But, I feel like I learn as much as I, impart, through just seeing how they think and approach, marketing tropes and things that we kind of take as gospel. Sometimes they, push, spin. Like you said, they have a different spin, or they think that's right. Old school. So
that's right. Yeah. I said, when I taught at UCLA, I'll just share this one last story, because these are just the moments that,
I love it.
I find, funny being at this phase, but I taught an intro to entertainment, media, and sports, because all of them are converging now, by the way.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. When I was at the Spurs, I was heading up the marketing for the arena. So that's the concerts and shows, and working with Live Nation. So a lot of it is converged. But I say that just to say, when I started doing the music portion of the lecture, and I put up all of the forms that we used to consume our music in. And when I put up a photo of a CD and see like the blank stares of people who have no idea what a CD is, it's just like, this is the fun part that our parents experienced, I guess. Yeah,
100%. All right. So under the leadership of your CEO, Courtney Buehler, you've propelled the organization's Blitz to Barriers initiative. This is a goal launched in late 2025 to save 100,000 lives by 2035. How important is it for nonprofit to have kind of stated timelines, metrics in which they keep themselves accountable, and what we would call, a big, hairy, audacious goal? How important is it to contextualize, the work that you're doing and ladder it up to a big metric like that? And how are things going?
Yeah, it's incredibly important, right? Because we talk a lot as marketers, and I've had this conversation, over years about the importance of the KPIs, because they're measuring outputs. But what really you need to speak to are the outcomes. And that's where that actual lives saved comes into play. And it is a bold and courageous statement to make, because we want people to not just think about a number of screenings. That's certainly important. We want them to realize what that leads to, which is ultimately the lives saved, or the number of people who then get the supported resources they need to make it to follow up, and then you have the decision-making support, in terms of treatment options. So all of those things ultimately lead to the outcome, which is a life saved. And so, yes, we want people to understand that all of this work is ultimately leading toward that. And that's why, that statement is so important. And it's funny that you mentioned the name Blitz the Barriers. I named Blitz the Barriers within my first couple of months there at the organization. And it was my sports marketing background, obviously, that tied into that. But also because, again, the approach that we're making is health. And when you're tackling, reducing disparities in cancer, that requires you to attack it from multiple angles. And so it very much is like a blitz. I mean, we are not just looking at the screening side, but we're looking at, again, getting ahead of it. And do you know, and in the community, and we're partnering with fraternities across the country, and all of those different elements that we are using to get to the issue and get to the end result is very much being approached like a blitz. So again, speaking the language of our target audience, not only from the sports terminology with that term, but we also thought about military veterans, and they are also twice as likely to be diagnosed with this disease. So we wanted something that would be a rallying cry, for that audience as well. But yes, the point that you made is what I think we're most proud of, and what we really try to focus on, whether it's our corporate partners, whether it's our community partners, is that yes, we are all in this together. And that we are the means to the end is, I mean, we had, an amazing partner who we still work with, Montel Jordan of This Is How We Do It, is another one of our voices. And he said, I want to save more than 100,000 lives. I mean, that's the kind of reaction that we want people to have when they're seeing that end goal and that end result. And so, it was purposeful and intentional for us to put that out there and focus on that.
So we've talked a little bit about marketing to men, especially in the context of health, the idea that men view health as, wellness and, what they're doing in the gym, and kind of if they feel healthy, they are healthy. They can be hard to reach with health messaging. What's the secret sauce for speaking to men in a way that moves them away from kind of the passive awareness that health is important and that screenings and checkups, I'm a bit guilty of this, never go to the doctor unless I feel bad.
I would say,
how do you get men to change those kind of those? I don't know. I guess they're rooted in just the way men think, without looking at us as a monolith.
Exactly. No, I agree. And it's funny you say that, because it really is a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we understand how important women are, the women in men's lives are to influencing them. I can't tell you how many of our, constituents have told us that it was their partner, their spouse, their mom, their sister who really nudged them to get in and get that screening. So that is an important aspect. At the same time, what we also see is very powerful is men hearing from other men. And if you hear from someone who says, yes, I know you may not want to do it, and your wife is nagging you, or your mom or something, but I did it, and here's what it did for me. That's the type of dialogue that we are ramping up, particularly with a disease like this, where there is a stigma, as you said, that sometimes you really would need to hear from someone else that has that same experience in life as you do. And, with prostate cancer in particular, it is, like I said, it's step one that deters a lot of men, because some men don't realize they can get a blood test first. And they think it's the dreaded.
Which has such a connotation in culture too, right? It's like a trope. It's a joke.
Exactly. So that is something that I know that maybe our woman audience will struggle with influencing in a way that you hearing directly from your peer, from another man is going to help, break down that stigma a bit more. So I can't tell you what a difference it's made. And this is where, again, I'm leaning heavily into content with our organization. So we certainly are a charity, but because of our unique connection to our audience, and this is also part of where we're going with ambassadors and influencers, but even with patients that are impacted and all of that, we're going to be doing a lot more storytelling, because the power of that conversation, I've witnessed it in real time. We did a panel with the NFL at the Super Bowl in my last role, where we had, Hall of Famers on stage talking with, active players that were in their 30s, but had a family history. And when they start saying, listen, I was worried about what people were going to say and what they're going to think if I had this, issue, and just for them to be able to communicate and open up the conversation, it was hugely impactful for those younger men, or men that, just didn't even want to go there and talk about it. So that direct breakdown through dialogue and content and conversation leads to the action that we're looking for. So that's going to be a bigger focus for us in the future, as well as the content.
You've talked about health equity in some of these demographics that are more highly susceptible to prostate cancer. You've identified African Americans as a segment, people with military service.
Right.
I'd be curious, how do you collect all of that data, and how do you find kind of these cultural insights of, micro communities or bigger chunks of the total addressable market that might be more susceptible? And then how do you design storytelling that can reach those communities while still having the awareness that you need in the overall cohort?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And we are incredibly fortunate to have talented, brilliant people working for our organization. I mean, one that I'm going to shout out that we brought in last year, used to head up all of the Department of Defense research around this
Wow.
issue. One of the things, PhD educated, just, brilliant director internally doing a lot of that research. Another thing I'm most proud of with our organization that's not as well known that we're working to raise the awareness around is we started out as the National Prostate Cancer Coalition. So we have always been the lead advocacy organization. And over 30 years, we've unlocked over $2 billion in public funding.
Wow.
So the $2 billion in public funding that the Department of Defense, funds because of that recognition of the connection to military veterans, that researcher that we now hired worked for that program. So we have people who have done this research for years, who truly understand how to go in and get that data, and be able to back up where we need to target. And it was part of what was the driving force of our Blitz the Barriers markets that we're going into. So the program was launched. It started in Atlanta, piloted in Atlanta, and it's piloting in Baltimore as the first two markets because of the data and the research that said nationally, Black men are twice as likely to die, 70% higher diagnosis rate, but twice as likely to die nationally. In the market of Atlanta, they're 5 times as likely,
Wow.
and there's also a significantly higher military population. So those research and insights that we're getting, to your point, is directly also driving where we go first, because we know that if we unlock and uncover what is going to help us, break down the disparity there, then that is something that we can then use to drive systems change across the country. So we're going to be going into 13 markets with that level of data on, again, who's the most impacted? Why are they most impacted? What are those steps all the way from pre-diagnosis to diagnosis to survivorship? And so it's a blitz. It's going to be like attacking it from a lot of those different angles, guided by the research and the insights that our team is doing.
Yeah, it seems like you're even using those insights to find the overlay, African American segment and military, and what regions are they most likely to live in. All right, well, we made it for most of the show without talking about AI. I know we've teased it a little bit.
I know. How could we?
But there is this massive shift towards agentic AI, hyper-personalization, and people taking control of their health journey through the lowers of the barriers to entry to testing, multi-panel screening, third-party screening outside of an organization that would be testing for a certain thing and might have a bias for giving you, a certain type of procedure, or sometimes it's like whoever pays for the screening has somewhat of an impact on the results. But as people are going and getting full panel blood work at Quest on their own with just a doctor's recommendation outside of and then uploading their data to ChatGPT or some of these specialized health AI companies that can take your entire blood scan and really give you, dietary and exercise and all sorts of interesting insights. How is this kind of ownership of customer data and individuals, really thinking about their data in a more strategic way to be proactive about their healthcare? Are there opportunities for organizations like yours and partners to tap into those for better targeting and better ways of identifying people before they run into problems, but still being compliant with things like HIPAA, et cetera?
Exactly, which is what I was going to say. Yeah, it's certainly an area of significant opportunity and upside, and absolutely our organization is going to have an advantage there of being closest to the patient, closest to the data. But it certainly starts with us making sure that we're protecting that data. So, have a lot of conversation with our chief operating officer and our legal team around, first and foremost, ensuring that we're abiding by those HIPAA guidelines and that we're not allowing that access outside of, what we are able to seek permission and share. But yes, we're thinking about AI and being on the forefront of AI in a very, very critical way because of all the reasons you mentioned in terms of how it can help us get further with, patients and being informed to make better decisions, to have better conversations with their doctors, and ultimately get to those treatments and those screenings that'll save lives. One of the other ways that we've already started leading in AI is just actually this past month, we launched ZAC for Zero, which is Zero's Access to Community Health is the acronym. But that is a text-based AI platform where anyone can access it. We have, the QR code where you can scan and text on our website, on our socials, and obviously the number appears everywhere that you find out information on ZERO Prostate Cancer. But Zach is there so that he can directly answer questions that have been informed by our approved guidelines and data that we're using. So you can get it from a source that is not necessarily just your doctor and your medical. We're certainly referring them back to that when it gets to that point. But part of our goal is to give information, again, based on our universe of other patients that have been through. Not all of these are medical questions that people are utilizing Zach for. Some of them are, what if I feel scared or afraid, or, I'm not sure about what conversations to have with my wife or with my children around, this disease, or around what I need to be aware of. What if I don't know my family history? Those questions that are really even pre, medical appointment that we're able to utilize Zach for. And, again, I think that it takes a while for them to get comfortable with an AI, but then once you realize that the advantage is that maybe you can ask it some things you're not comfortable asking someone in your life, I think that's also for us, and particularly with men, where we're hoping that's going to resonate and cut through. So yes, we're certainly, like I said, protective of the data, because Zach is going to bring us a lot of that, data, and we're going to make sure that, we're following guidelines with it. But what a treasure trove of information that's going to help other people that we're able to get through the Zach AI platform as well. So just launched it and already starting to, review and get a lot of great information that's, yes, going to benefit our partners in the future ultimately.
Amazing. Well, it's a brave new world for sure. Well, Sherí, fascinating conversation. Thanks for all the important work that you're doing in advocating for this important issue, especially one that affects, men in higher numbers. So loved the conversation and just all the interesting things that you're doing. If folks want to follow along with your thinking or continue to learn more, where would you like to send the audience to follow along?
Yes, definitely go to my LinkedIn. Happy to connect and have conversation there. And it's, Sherí Barros on LinkedIn. And then obviously want to encourage people to go check out zerocancer.org. That's our Zero Prostate Cancer web address where you can, get in touch with Zach or learn about others programs that we have and support. Obviously, we'll be putting out a lot more information on our social channels as well, which are Zero Cancer or Zero Prostate Cancer on Instagram, Facebook. We're on all the platforms. So follow along with us, and yes, happy to have dialogue directly as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who are logging in and watching for the first time, don't forget to give us a subscribe or a follow if you want to hear from other amazing marketing leaders like Sherí. And if you are listening to the show, an honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening on is a great way to support the show and help us find a larger audience. So do that. And last but not least, if there is a marketer in your world who, maybe wants to align with this important men's health conversation, or maybe somebody in sports marketing who would appreciate some of the insights that Sherí shared today, or most importantly, maybe there's a man out there in your life somewhere who doesn't like to go to the doctor and needs to know about the importance of early detection and screening. Don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a great weekend. Have a good one, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.